Good day, everyone. We, of course, are glad you guys to join us again for another Talk It Over. I'm starting our new series in the book of Ruth,
Yeah.
which so far, was a good message.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite enjoyed it. Before we dive into that, we've got Dave with me this week. Of course, my name is Ian, and just do a little catch up here. How was your past week's been going?
It was good. We were actually at the Global Leadership Summit for a couple of days
Yes.
on the Thursday and Friday, and it was excellent. It always is. And I like it because there's always speakers that I love and I learn from, and there's ones I disagree with, and ones that are surprising. And I love that mixture because we're learning from lots of different people, and God always has something really good. So it's a non-negotiable for me. I've been going now for almost 30 years. It's been a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. So they had a little competition there. Who's been coming to the summit the longest? And
Yep.
I won a little mug because
Oh,
that was me.
it was the longest
Yeah.
one. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been good. My wife, of course, was there as well.
Yeah.
I was looking after the little guy. We're doing a little bit of camping this week, which has been good and enjoyable. Had a doctor's appointment, which was in Toronto, and drive back was 3 hours, which was
Not
crazy.
enjoyable. Yeah.
Not overly enjoyable, but otherwise, yeah, appointment was good. A lot of information, a lot of new information, and seems to be we'll have a pretty good direction for him for the next little steps. So happy about that, which has been good.
Yeah.
And then just before did the camping this week, went in for a physio appointment assessment for my arm. So getting that kind of in the motion to see what we can do to maybe rectify some of the pain, lack of grip strength, things like that. See if there's things we can do to kind of loosen some stuff up and get it kind of working the way it was before
That's
it
good.
started. So
That's good.
yeah, I got my daily exercises. I've been trying to get those in to get
Yeah.
things moving, and then start the appointment schedule, I guess, this coming week. So
Yeah.
should be good getting that going and get back to 100%, which will be nice. So
Nice.
yeah, it's been good. So we're in the book of Ruth for the next few weeks here, and the title of this one is When It's Time to Walk Away.
Yes.
Which can be a difficult thing sometimes to do when you think you're doing like the right thing or a good thing.
Yeah.
To walk away from those.
It's
Sometimes.
a very interesting title for this one that he chose. So
It is.
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent message. Our scripture today comes from, of course, Ruth. Ruth 1, verses 1 to 2. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and his 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Malor and Kilor. They were
Ephraimites.
Wow.
Yeah.
From Bethlehem
Yeah.
and Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. So yeah, a little bit of context there. As Israelites, they decided to leave Bethlehem and move to a different place called
Yeah.
Moab, which I know God referred to as like the basin where he would wash his feet.
The wash basin.
So I don't know, that to me seems like not the greatest place
It's
you
not
want
good.
to
No.
move to. But of course, that's where they felt they should go.
Yeah.
So in this message, Dave, was there a part that really was impactful, something that really kind of spoke out to you this week?
I think there was a couple things that were significant. I like the fact that oftentimes when I was reading scripture when I was younger, even into my early 20s, you read it and you just assume that whatever is happening, it's the right choice because it's in the Bible.
Yep.
And so when you read the book of Ruth and you read like this family moves to Moab, you're thinking, oh, well, that's what they needed to do. So of course, that's the right thing to do.
Yep.
And then Craig is like, well, no, was it really?
Yes.
Like, let's really dig into, was that a good decision? Because oftentimes the scriptures will give us examples of bad decisions.
Yes.
And so I thought that really impacted me to think through, okay, when you're reading the scriptures, make sure you're open to, just because that's what they did doesn't mean that was good.
Yes.
And what can I learn from their choice? And so he unpacks that with, here's a guy whose name, Malon, means, God is king.
Yep.
And he's not following directions of his king. He's going to a country he's been told not to go to
Yep.
in order to escape the famine. And just how that plays itself out and how we try to make things happen because we think God's not going to or we don't trust him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that choice they made was a poor choice to try and survive so they didn't die of starvation, and they go into the land and they end up dying anyway.
Yeah.
And so it was a poor choice in the end.
Yeah.
So like, whoa.
Yeah. Sometimes when we think it's the right thing to do, it's not what God wants us to do, right? And in that case, yeah, it was we need to do this, but not what God was telling them to do and move the family. And yeah, it was quite interesting. And some of the definitions of the names for the sons was like referred to like sick and the other tired,
Yeah.
which was I thought somewhat ironic to the
Oh
story
man.
itself. And so that was a little interesting, the
Yeah.
explanation of the names, just to again just give a bit more context to kind of about the family.
The meaning of it.
For me, I think it was kind of right near the end of the message when we had Ruth and Naomi after sons had died and
Yep.
husband had died, and she decided she would finally, after 10 years, wanting to go back to
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. And that Naomi was like, I will follow you, don't push me away, that
Yeah.
your people be my people and your God will be my God. And
Yeah.
turning away from her Moabite culture and worshiping false gods and sacrifices and all that,
In Moab.
to really follow Naomi, her mother-in-law, back to a land that, of course, wasn't her land.
Yeah.
And just her taking on that almost a bit of a challenge to integrate into that culture of a completely different land, right?
And I'll follow your God.
Yeah, and having that as the impact that she's going to give up everything,
Yeah.
follow you, and really integrate herself into the whole culture in Bethlehem, the
Yeah.
Israelite people, and really become one with them.
Yeah.
And seeing that dedication of that's what she wanted to do, and actually go and follow her mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Now, there could be some other things. Maybe again, had no other family there, nobody else around that
Yeah.
would be there with her, and this was the closest thing she had to a real family, and just wanting to be around her mother-in-law.
But that kind of loyalty, right? It's pretty admirable.
It is.
Yeah.
Considering there was the two daughter-in-laws. One decided to stay and
Yeah.
live there, and the other decided to follow Naomi. And yeah, quite the dedication just to pick up and just move to a whole different area. It almost would be now like a different country in a sense, right? Even though it's only 50 miles apart.
50 miles. Yeah. Like the two places they went to were so close, but
when you think about it, it's like it's completely almost different countries,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
everything's completely different. So yeah, just that dedication to say, no, this is going to be my God as well. That
Yeah.
your God will be my God, and dedicating herself to that. Again, it's just a good reminder for us just to remember that no, we need to stay dedicated to God and what He's called us to.
Yeah.
Whether it's easy or hard, or whether we think it should be different, we still need to
Yeah.
follow and continue to obey what He's called us to do. Okay, so what does it look like to trust God, and what makes it easy or difficult to trust Him?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
That idea of trusting God, because there are times where it's easy to trust God. And so it's like, look, see, I'm trusting you.
Yep.
I prayed, God answered, I'm trusting you.
Yep.
That was easy.
Yep.
It's when you're talking to God about something and you don't feel like He's giving you answer or direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm waiting or I'm unsure. And then like, I don't know if maybe I should just do it myself.
Yep.
Anyway, which is exactly what they did.
Yep.
And that can work out so horribly. Or you just take matters in your hands. Even something that God has given you direction on and said, I want you to do this.
Yep.
But rather than go through the process to get there that God has for you, you shortcut it.
Yep.
And in the end, it ends up being a mess. And so I've seen that happen too. So the idea of you wait on God and then you follow His direction.
Yep.
And when the timing is different, the expectations are different.
Yep.
God, I thought it was going to look like this. Started doing some life coaching, and okay, God, I think this is what it's going to look like, but I'm trying to be at a point where, God, no, I trust you, and so you let me know.
Yep. Yep.
Because I come with my own ideas and expectations, and I can push those onto God and say, this is how God's going to do it.
Yep.
And it's not. And so trusting Him means, what way do you want it done? What does this look like?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, trusting him. Yeah, it's interesting how it looks to do that, because yeah, it's easy to do it in the in the easy times or the good times, but I think that's kind of what it encompasses. It's in the good times, it's in the waiting times, and it's in the hard times. That's what it looks like to really trust God.
Yeah.
Um, but it can be, yeah, easy or difficult. Because when the water is smooth and calm, it's easy because everything's just going along
What's
real
going
nice
on?
and it's going along easy. But when you hit that moment of you've prayed about things and you're just waiting,
Yeah.
that can be a really difficult time to want to wait,
Yeah.
because you can see what the end goal maybe you think it should be,
Yeah.
and you're waiting for God to answer that so you can move forward. But instead of waiting, which maybe what God is having you do at that time is
Yeah.
just to wait, you take that step and say, no, I'm gonna make this
I'll
happen.
make it
I'll
happen.
make it happen, and I'll go do this.
Oh,
And it can turn out quite disasterful,
yeah.
when we try to take those steps or move things in a direction that maybe God wants us to go, but it's not on the right time,
Yeah.
and we're moving it forward. And then when things are difficult, that can be even more challenging, because it's like you almost lose sight of where are you in this?
Yeah.
Where I don't feel you close, I don't see you near me.
Yeah.
And can be really hard to really want to continue to trust, knowing that you don't feel him close,
Yeah.
and yet he's always there. But sometimes, again, it's that building of perseverance when we hit those trials, those hard, difficult moments, where we have to trust and continue to push through them, not shortcut it to make it easier, right?
Or I remember reading a book where it called it the land in between, right?
Mm.
You're here, you're trying to get to there, and it's like Israel wandering the desert where
Yep.
there just doesn't seem to be a lot of happening here.
Yes.
Like we're not making much traction, doesn't feel very successful. Like something needs to change. I don't want to just continue like this. And to be content in that moment is really
Oh
hard,
yeah. Yep.
right? While God gets you ready for where you got to go. And so, yeah, we take matters in our own hands. We try and push the agenda forward more quickly.
Yes.
And if it's not what God intended, it can work out pretty badly.
Yeah. Yeah. And for sure, in the Book of Ruth here, husband dies, son dies, like, because they're
Yeah,
trying to escape famine,
yeah.
and
Just
yet they still die anyway.
they didn't escape anything.
No, they didn't escape any of the problems that they were having. They didn't escape them. They just kind of continued on and just
Yeah,
didn't live or be where they were meant to be.
yeah.
And unfortunately, they didn't follow what God asked them, and turned
Well,
out to be not great for them.
and we think that if we could just get to the end, everything would be fine. And it came up a little bit in the conference. Like the problem is when you try to get away from yourself to
Yep.
get to some new destination,
Mm,
you take you with you.
yes.
And so you show up there, but you're still the same person. And so it doesn't really change anything, even though you've arrived where you think would help.
Yep.
And what really would have helped would be you changing and learning and growing through the
Yep.
process.
Yep. Yeah. And that certainly stems into a lot of different areas where you're trying to either escape or use something to escape from the problem or from yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I know you see it a lot where people are like, "Oh, I'm going to go on vacation. We're going to relax. Everything's going to be better." Okay, you disappear for a week, but you come back and the problems are still exactly where you left them. They haven't
Yeah.
just disappeared. And this false idea of I could just run away or get away or escape from this, um, it doesn't work. It's always there with you, because you do bring you with you.
Or you get on vacation and there's conflict and there's tension. And you're like, we're on vacation. Why is it
This
like this?
this is supposed to be relaxing.
Because it's me, right? I bring
Yeah.
it with me.
Yep, everything travels with you, your emotions, your frustrations, everything are always with you. It's not that they take their own vacation, they're always with you. And yeah, you think you're going to have this splendid vacation or whatever, and it turns out to be just the same as it was at home, just now you're in a different location.
Because your habits are the same, your attitudes are the same, your character is the
Yep.
same. None of that has changed.
Yep.
But we mysteriously think that no, when I get there, it'll be fine.
Yep.
And sometimes those are good goals.
Yep.
I mean, I know for you, when it came to transplant, it's like, I'm going to be the one that donates to my son
Yep.
a kidney. And this is a good goal, right? As
Yep.
a dad, to be able
Yep.
to do that, save your life, son's life in that way,
Yep.
this is good.
Yep.
And then God's like, no, that's not the goal.
Yeah, that's not the goal. Yep.
Like, I'm going to provide for Emmett, but it's going to be in a different way.
Yep.
You're like, "Ah."
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard when you get to that moment. And yeah, you've set a goal, you've been working at it, and then you end up with the disappointment.
Yeah.
And the disappointment can be really challenging, because you're so set on accomplishing that, and then when it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
um, it's it's difficult. You tend to find, you start questioning, well, what was the point? Why did I start? What was the right? And in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, it was like, it's not necessarily that end point. It was the journey of getting to even the end of this
Yeah.
isn't it, but that journey to get there, and what it did through that journey allowed us to really build a bit more of a story, and then also allowing me to find some medical things that I need to look at that I probably wouldn't have
Wouldn't
found
have
by
known.
not going through that process.
Yeah.
So for my overall health, it was a help in that sense
Yeah.
to find a few things that maybe would have been overlooked or not seen,
Yeah.
because it's not something you'd be looking at to scan kidneys regularly. So for me, it was a help in that sense, that I've been able to monitor myself a little more closely,
Yeah.
and make sure things for me are staying good and not changing, and that. But in that moment, it's, yeah, that disappointment is very challenging.
And yet God had a plan and provided a donor
Yep,
and an excellent match, and it's
yep,
worked out really well.
it has.
But
Yep.
you don't know that because it's all about our expectations, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And sometimes you can miss that, and then you start not seeing maybe the blessing that it could be from a different area.
Yeah.
And but when that does come along and you get to see that, it's like, okay, no, this is the direction it needed to go, and we had the right person to donate that, again, the match and everything, and all that worked out really, really well. And the timing of how it all went was exactly on point, because it would have changed when Emmett was in hospital. It would have changed when
Yes. Before COVID
everything,
and everything.
it would have
Yeah.
changed how the whole thing went
Yeah.
by that. So in the big scheme, looking back, it was exactly the right timing, the right thing that all needed to happen at the right points,
Yeah.
all needed to happen to
Yeah.
make it exactly where it needed to
It
be.
was perfect.
The timing was exactly perfect, and God was the one that orchestrated all that. There's no way I orchestrated any of that. So hey, it was on His time, and that's how it worked. And it's just, yeah, you have to deal with the difficulties of disappointment, but then realizing that there's a different plan for it, and seeing it come around
Yeah.
into a different direction. So
Well, and I love that God gives us a choice. Will you trust me and do it my way?
yep,
Or will you ignore it and do it your own
yep,
way? Right? It's the Adam and Eve choice
hmm,
about,
hmm,
who's going to decide what's good here, you or me.
yeah,
And we choose the good sometimes and it works out, and sometimes we don't. And yet God is so gracious in that. Sometimes he'll like, okay, you don't want to do it my
yep,
way. I got to leave you behind. It's like the book of Esther, right? I got to leave you behind. I got to find somebody else
yep,
to get this done. But other times he's like, you know what? I'm going to work with your mistake and I'm going to incorporate it.
yep,
And so Craig talked about the fact that with Esther being a Moabite who they weren't supposed to intermarry with, she becomes part of the lineage of Jesus.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So God actually it's not like you got cut off now, you've screwed up, you're
yep,
done.
yep,
It's like, I'm going to incorporate that in the story of Jesus I'm bringing into the world.
yeah, yeah. And seeing that part, right, taking a woman that's, would be classified as a very, unclean, very,
Yeah.
kind of the lowest bottom of where people would see
Yeah.
in society, to see Ruth become, yeah, this huge part of the story.
Yeah.
um, and seeing that shift in how God can use even, us being flawed, and being using the flaws and things, and working around us,
Yeah.
and working through us to create something so much better later on. But again, one of those things, at the time, she never would have known that. She wouldn't have known
Has
any
no
of that,
idea.
right?
No idea.
But God working through her, and guiding her through the journey
Yeah.
to get her to where she needed to be,
Yeah.
was all part of it. So
Well, and Craig talked about, he kind of likened it a little bit to people who date those who are not
oh,
believers,
yes,
right?
yes,
He made that connection.
yep,
And I thought that was interesting because, again, we have a goal, we have an agenda, like this is what I get to, and we think this person will do it.
yep,
And God's like, if they're not a believer, don't do that, right? You're setting yourself for hurt.
yep,
Don't do that. But because we hear stories sometimes of people who marry someone who's not a believer, and then God gets a hold of their heart and they
yep,
become believers, and it works out really well. And we think, yes, that's going to be my story.
yep,
It's going to be, Ruth's story
yep,
where oh, it's going to use me in this great thing, even though I was a Moabite.
Yeah.
And yet there are lots of stories where God's like, I can't work with that. The marriage falls apart
Yeah.
because this person has their own free will in
Yeah.
terms of, am I going to become a believer or not? They decide not to. And then they get so upset, like, God, why didn't you save my spouse?
Yep. Yep.
And God was like, I warned you. I told you up front, don't
Yep.
do that.
Don't do that.
And you didn't trust me.
Yep.
You
Yep.
decided to do it your own way. And that shortcut ends up causing a lot of hurt.
It does. It does. It does. Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting reference about dating non-Christians and how that would work. And you're already setting yourself up for an extremely difficult path,
Right? Could
right?
be.
And because the free will part of it is where what's their choice, right? And in some cases, God gets a hold of them and on you go. But
Yeah.
I would say on the more cases, it's going to not work out in the way that the person felt it should work out. That,
Yeah.
oh, I can change them, I can bring this in, and working through me, God's going to change them. But until they make that choice to want to change, there's no amount of you forcing something to try to make it happen.
Well, and as a pastor, I've seen so many times where it's when kids come along and now we're trying to teach our kids and raise our kids, and you've got opposing value systems.
Yes.
I want them to know and believe this, and I want them to know and believe something different, and now you've got conflict.
Yep. Yep. That certainly leads to quite big conflict when things are very different in what you believe or what you believe the value should be, and it certainly can lead to a lot more conflict and certainly more hurt and
But
challenge.
can that happen in spouses when it comes just to trusting God? Even if you're both believers, like if one is like, I really want to trust God, and the other one is, I'm not really there.
Yep.
That could set the same kind of conflict, right?
It certainly can. Yeah, it certainly can set the same kind of conflict because if one's unsure, kind of, but not really there, and one that's like, we need to trust, and then you come to a difficult decision or whatever that might be, then it's like, well, I think we should do it this way. Well, God told us we should do it this way. Well, I'm not sure if I really believe what he's saying. Certainly can bring up conflict and certainly more difficulty in the marriage for sure, whatever it might be. Certainly can add to even the dysfunction, right? And it's difficult. And I know for me and my wife, I believed, but on a different level than she was when we met, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't that I was not a believer. I was a believer, but just at a different stage in that. And her encouragement helped me to ask some questions, gain more information, and kind of work towards becoming more trusting, more understanding about what God was, being a very traditional church where you have to be in the building and all your steps and things right. And for some reason, I always felt that's the way everything church was, and that's how it all worked. And I didn't quite enjoy that, and so trying to find a different direction and finding where we are now at Life Church, Life North Church, it's just part of a different journey, a different relationship. It's not about the specific prayers and this and that. It's not quite.
It's not about the rituals.
Yeah, the ritual part of it. It's about the relationship, the day-to-day relationship.
And to think you can have a relationship with God where you're trusting him with like day-to-day ongoing decisions and direction in your life. Like that's so extreme from, no, I just have to pray this prayer and I'm done.
Yeah. It's a very different look at how it works. And what that relationship looks like. And through that though, like with trusting God, when it comes to decisions that we make as a family, it's always down to, okay, we discuss, get our perspectives. Because again, we have opinions and maybe different opinions on certain things. But when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, we've discussed, we understand each other. So now let's pray about it and see what the direction is. What do we need to do? What does God asking us to do? What's he directing us to, with whatever the discussion was, whatever the, decision we needed to make. We come to it together, and then it's okay. Now we need to pray about it. Now, what does God want us to do with this? What do we see? What do we do? Where do we head? And then we wait. And it's all part of the waiting. And unfortunately, sometimes the waiting is waiting. But but we just keep praying about it, keep asking for the guidance and the direction, and we wait. Sometimes it's very quick. It's like, that's it. That's the direction. Sometimes you need to wait a bit.
Yeah.
It's not the right time.
Yeah.
Right. It's not on the right schedule that God's got it for us, but we've, discussed it. We've talked about, we've prayed about it, and it's okay now.
That is so challenging.
It is.
And I think for Carol and I as a couple, we've kind of learned a little bit where we get caught up is we pray about it and, okay, I want you to do this is where I think God is saying. And then we get that image in mind of what that looks like.
Yes.
And oftentimes when we get there, that's not what God intended. It was
Yep.
like that, but kind of different.
Yep.
And so letting go of that, the disappointment you started, letting go of that, that can be hard because you get your heart set on, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah. It certainly can be hard. It is hard to not want to picture the end result, right?
Yeah.
Because we like to see the goal. We like to work towards
Yep.
what we're trying to achieve
Yep.
or get to. And then, when God's like, oh, we're going to do a little sidestep this way just a little bit, and not having the result that we pictured, certainly can be difficult. It can be challenging. It can be a disappointment. But again, knowing ahead of time that, no, God's got the plan, God's got the direction,
Yeah.
and trusting that and knowing the direction that He's got, it will vary from ours because we like to paint the perfect picture of what we think's perfect.
Yeah.
But accepting the fact that, okay, we've got our picture, but God's probably got a slightly different picture. But you got to be okay with the different picture when we get there. That's the thing. Whether it's exactly what you thought, completely different than what you thought, but the end result of getting there is exactly kind of where we want to be. So
I love that. And all of this just from the first few verses in Ruth.
Well, yeah, which is it's crazy.
Right?
It's crazy. And considering, we've got, a number of weeks yet left of Ruth, I think is going to be just excellent. It is an excellent book. It's a short book.
Yeah.
Excellent book. You don't really see the miracles in that book or real big aha moments.
Yeah.
But the whole book itself and where it leads to is certainly excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent
Good.
little book.
It's good. I'm looking forward to it.
So yeah, should be really good. I want to leave you guys with one question, which of course you guys can bring to your own life groups or to somebody who you have trust in, somebody who you can really talk to, whether that's a friend, a family member, somebody who's really close to you. So the question we have for you: is there an area in your life that you need to surrender to God? Now that could be any area. That could be in your finances. That could be in your day-to-day relationships, anything like that. Some area that maybe you're trying to control or hold on to. Is there an area that you need to let go and surrender to God? And let somebody know, though. Talk to somebody about that. Let them know that this is an area that you are letting go, that you want to surrender to God, that you want Him to take charge of. And have them be accountable to you. Continue to check in with you about that and how things are going, because it is difficult to surrender something for the first time and to really let go of it and let God have the control. So having that support from somebody close to you, being able to encourage you in that direction and continue to support you in that as you move forward in that step of surrender.
Yeah.
But man, we have had quite a discussion today with Ruth, and I'm looking forward to the continued discussions with Ruth as we move forward. So we, of course, want to thank you guys again for joining us this week for another great Talk It Over. I want to thank the tech team behind us for making this, of course, all possible. And we always want to remember, whoever finds God finds life.